Here's the mini version of the official LEGO Technic Mercedes-Benz Arocs set. This is made for the Eurobricks contest TC25, shrink and official set. So for this model I decided to go for half of the scale of the original set, which makes it far, far smaller, about an eighth of the total volume, I think, would be the theoretical amount. But I still wanted to keep as many functions as I could, which made for a challenging build. So this is what it looks like. So two functions from the original set that I was able to keep pretty nicely were the steering and the suspension. So the steering is controlled by this knob here. It turns the front two axles at different angles, so the front wheels steer more. It doesn't have an amazing turning circle, but I'm alright with that. And the second one I was able to keep is basically live axle suspension on all four axles. So see, you can push down there, push down here, tilt it. If I take off this gear here, put it under the wheel, oops, it's not really big enough to stay, but we can press down on it, keep the other wheels on the ground. So that is based off of these official LEGO springs placed on flick-fire missile pieces, which allows the axle to move however it wants. That's how it works in the front. In the rear, it's based on rubber bands and swing arms, like this. We've also got extending outriggers using this knob here. So this opens both sides at once. And then it's much too small to have proper extending legs, so I just have a system using these pins with axle holes. So that's how those work. Flip it up. See, they're linked like that. Then we've got a dumping bed using a small linear actuator, manually controlled. And then at the back here, like on the original set, there's a little manual latch we can use to allow the skate to swing down and dump the load. Also, now that it's open, we can see the mechanism for the outriggers, based on these 8-tooth gears and bevel gears. It's pretty challenging to make it this compact, but it works pretty smoothly. The rest of the functions all have to do with the crane arm. So just like the original set, we've got 4 pneumatic functions in the crane arm, which is pretty challenging at this scale. Naturally, they're all using small cylinders, but because at this scale, running 2 hoses to each cylinder, so 8 total hoses through a turntable, that would be pretty much impossible. So I decided to use the old style of pneumatics, used in a few sets in the 80s, before they released the modern system of pneumatics. Because in the old system, instead of using compressed air to push it out and push it back in, it would compress air to push cylinders out, and then use suction to pull them back in. And this system requires only 1 hose per cylinder. You can see I've only got 1 on there, only got 1 on there, 1 on there, and so on. So with that, I've got 4 hoses running through there. Then we've got this cylinder from the old system working as a pump on both compression and suction. And then this funny looking 2x4 brick here is an old distribution block, which works like a one-way valve to allow the compression and the suction to go where they need to go. So we got the 1 hose coming from the pump to the distribution block. Then the 2 hoses from here go to the valves, going what we're used to knowing as the outputs, but here they're actually 2 inputs. And then the center of the valve goes to the cylinder. So we've got 4 valves stuffed in here. It's very tight. Take off the roof so you can see just how tight it is. All this fancy hose routing here. And then runs underneath here, and they run up to a small turntable to the arm. So in just a minute I'll demonstrate it. So here's the pneumatic system in operation. So we lift the first cylinder, and second cylinder, third cylinder. This one seems a little cranky generally, but there it goes. Bucket. I guess it's open now. No, I think I have the valve going the wrong way. Try this. Afraid it's all stuck. Okay. Let's try this again now that it's freed up. So opening. Closing. Then use this knob here to rotate the crane arm out. Then lower that down. Lower that. Let's open the claw. Other way on the valve. Pretend we picked up something. This is not a claw, it's a bucket. Lift the arm. Lift the second section. Rotate it back in. Retract there. Retract that. Retract that. And we're back to the default position. That's essentially it for functions, except for one tiny little thing I kind of like. The original set had these little yellow wheel chocks, and I managed to get one in here as well, so you could use that to block a wheel. Anyways, that's not very important. But overall, I'm quite pleased with the model. I managed to make the scale much, much smaller, but keep all the core functionality. I had to get rid of the piston engine and the tip-in cab, and then other stuff had to, be downgraded from motorized to manual, or motorized with a gearbox to manual and direct. But overall, I think it worked out pretty well. Got to keep the functionality without making it too unreliable. Kept it looking pretty good. And yeah, I guess that's all you really need. It is a little fragile. It's probably the weakest spot of the model, but overall, I think that's kind of a necessary compromise to put this amount of functionality in this amount of a space.